And good evening. My approach to rejection is always either zen or fatalistic, depending on how I want to look at it. At some point, even the worst ones, I will eventually just say, what are you going to do? Death, taxes, rejection. I mean, this goes back as far as Greek theater. There's nothing new under the sun. And that said, there is still some weird, dark, moldy corner of my psyche that believes that on at least one occasion I was rejected in a way that is unique in all of human history. And it's pretty basic. I was around 17 years old. The girl I was dating broke up with me. I'm not saying the event is particularly groundbreaking. It was the methodology that did it to me. Her name was Amanda. She was a skinny dance student who had long dark hair and very brown eyes and very, very long eyelashes. We were part of the same group of friends. I'd never looked at her romantically until she came to see a play that I was in. It was a version of Spring Awakening, not the musical version. And I was a theater kid. I was also a film geek. I had to get a very severe crew cut for that play, and it made me self-conscious. So I started wearing a long brown trench coat because I thought it made me look like Harrison Ford in Blade Runner. That was perhaps a little over-optimistic. And Amanda came to the show, and she said the show was great, and she liked my haircut, and she came on the same night that my sister showed up. And my sister took us both out for pizza and a lot of red wine at the kind of place where they don't card you. So by the time Amanda and I got in the subway, we were more than a little bit drunk. And like I said, I was an artsy kid. That night I was carrying around a copy of the play and a copy of Endless Love. Okay, the novel, not like the horrible song or the two bad movies. I mean, the novel's great. It was about teenage obsession. I figured it might get me in character for the play. And Amanda looked at it and said, "Is that a romance?" I said, "No, actually, it's a psychodrama. It begins with a poem by Delmore Schwartz, if you're interested." And since I was an artsy kid, I stared into her very, very dark brown eyes and read her the poem, because I just realized then she was really, really pretty. So I said, "I no more wrote and read the word that is the self I am, half hidden as it is from one and all who see within a kiss the dark shadows of an abyss. How could I think a few years' time could prove an eternity of endless love?" That's not exactly a romantic poem. And it may be a little prophetic, but it didn't matter, because she looked at me and she leaned forward and she kissed me. A long, detailed, wet, passionate kiss. And that's pretty much what we did all the way from Union Station to Yonge and Shepherd. We did not stop when somebody said, "Get a room." We did stop when some guy leaned over and said, "I have a few suggestions." By the time I got home that night, I was drunk from the kisses and from the wine, and I remember thinking, I don't know if I have a girlfriend, but at least it means she likes me. And as it turns out, by the end of that week, I did have a girlfriend, an equally artsy, beautiful girlfriend. At the time, she was listening to a lot of Ricky Lee Jones. Anybody know her? Kind of pop, kind of beat poetry. She used to live in a car with Tom Waits in the 1970s. She would occasionally break into these weird soliloquies in the middle of her songs. You know, "The day you first hear your heartbeat listens for you still," that kind of thing. Not exactly top 40. The play ended in May, so for June, July, and August, I was dating Amanda. It was a very rainy summer, so I could keep wearing that long trench coat and not die of heat prostration. And when it wasn't raining, we saw a lot of movies, we drank a lot of coffee, we spent a lot of time in a park, Earl Bales Park. Anybody know it? Yeah, North York, beautiful, like lots of green space, a couple of beautiful sloping hills, one in particular, one beautiful space that we could lie around and stare at the sky, stare at the stars, stare at each other, make out, you know, the standard. And I had a wonderful day there. I had one moment in particular. I think we'd been kissing for an hour or so, and trying to be cute, I said, "There was no better way to spend an afternoon." And she looked at me and said, "Then with you." And I melted. It was perfect. I was sunk. I had never felt cared for like that. I had never had anyone talk to me that way. I wouldn't change a moment of that. Oh yeah, the rejection. Okay. So it's August by this point, and I had to go away for a week to visit some family. I came back, went out for a movie with Amanda, and it was a really rainy night. When I picked her up, she was a little quiet, but nothing particularly suspicious. And we went to a movie, and we're sitting there, and around, a third of the way through, I reached over to hold her hand. Now, I've been doing this all summer. If you want the graphic details, usually I would kind of slide my hand onto her lap, under her hand, so we could twine our fingers that way. Except this time when I did it, I reached over, she pulled away, instantly. And then took a moment to stretch, and then crossed her arms so her hands were safely out of reach. And it's like she had been touched by a cobra, and she never stopped staring at the screen. And I realized that I'd just been dumped at a movie, during the movie, silently. And I was convinced that I'm the only person in the human race this has ever happened to. Now, I can make a case for the fact that movies have only been in public exhibition since 1895. That does drastically knock down the number of humanity, but that still might be overstatement. And the best part, or the worst part if you were me, I had never been dumped before. Like, I had somehow made it to the age of 17 years old with more than a few girlfriends, and I had never been dumped. Anyone I was having a relationship with, we would either let it fizzle out or we just kind of agree to stop doing it. So for around a minute and a half, I just sat there and went, oh, I've been dumped. Wow. Well, this sucks. And then I remembered a line from an old movie, something about a gentleman should know when to leave the party before he is handed his hat. So I did something that might read as sulky, but I was honestly trying to be stoic. I thought, okay, if I'm being told that my services are no longer required, I can at least leave quietly and without protest. So the movie ended, and we walked out of the theater, and we walked 1 or 2 blocks away, and neither of us said a word. And finally she said, you want to go have a cup of coffee? No. No, I did not. Because I knew that she was going to explain what had happened, and since it had already happened, that struck me as insult to injury. I didn't want to hear her explain it. Like, the worst part of the evening already happened. So I said, no, I'm just going to go home tonight. And she looked a little surprised. She said, I'll go with you. And we get to the subway, and you do not say a word for the trip. Now, I lived at Yonge and York Mills. She lived at Yonge and Shepherd. Usually, I would take her to Shepherd Station. I'd walk upstairs with her, stand around for the bus, and we could talk or kiss or both. And it was very clear that neither activity was going to be on offer that night. I wanted her to know that I was not trying to edge my way to it. So as we pulled into York Mills, I stood up and said, you can get home okay? She said, yeah. And she started to stand up, and maybe to give me a hug, and that hug would have killed me. I would have known that it is the last time. So I put my hand on her shoulder, very gently, and she sat down. And the train stopped. I just looked at her and said, take care of yourself, sweetie. And I walked off the train. Pulled up the Trenchcoat collar. Walked directly down the center of the platform, trying not to watch the train, but I did see it disappear, and maybe she saw me disappear. And then we were done. Incidentally, stoicism only goes so far. Around 2 weeks later, I called her outright and said, why do you not want to date me? Dignity, right? And her response was very nice and not, without regret. But she essentially boils down to, I just want to be friends. And I was barely smart enough to realize asking more questions will not help my case. But I did talk to her best friend, and I said, did I do something wrong? And her friend said, maybe she's sick of you, Michael. I mean, I love her, and I get sick of her. Maybe she's just sick of you, Michael. I could build that case. I was sick of me at the time. And it's around a month and a half later now, and I have to take my cousins someplace. I'm babysitting them, so I take them to Earl Bales Park so they can run around like madmen. And I got there and I thought, you know what? If nothing else, I had a really nice time here. I have some nice memories here. This can be a wonderful thing. And I walk to that special, gentle, sloping hill in the background, and I get there, and the hill is gone. There's a bulldozer, there are tracks, there's mud, there's a concrete path, and the concrete path leads to a concrete pad that has girders and pipes sticking out of it and a sign saying, septic treatment number 3. I realize I've been rejected by the girl and the landscape. And around a month later, I go to a party and I end up meeting Amanda, and we make out for 2 hours. Cheers. Because we're teenagers, that's what happens. And after that, I had on-again, off-again boyfriend status, which sounds much better than the occasional hookup. That is kind of what I meant. And we were like that for a long time. At least it means she likes me, but never went further than that. And this went on for long enough that we started to drive each other crazy. By the time she moved, when I was in university, she went to Montreal. I think I told somebody I was not going to go to her going away party. It wasn't a conscious boycott, I just didn't want to go. And then Amanda's sister called me, thoroughly unimpressed, saying, Michael, go to the party, give her a hug. And I did. And it was surprisingly sweet, because she introduced me to anybody I didn't know. She'd say, hi, this is Michael, he was my boyfriend. Yeah, no, he was my boyfriend we were girlfriend, boyfriend, he was my boyfriend. I'm not sure why she did that, but it did kind of feel nice. And I run into her every so often. I mean, her mother still refers to me as Trenchcoat Mike. And everyone survived. When you talk about rejection, the only result that this has really had in my life, the only bearing it has in my life, in the year of our Lord 2023, is that whenever somebody mentions the term rejection, I do not think about being rejected from job opportunities or bank loans or arts grants or apartment rentals or anything like that. You see rejection to me? Rejection is when you reach to hold somebody's hand and they pull away so quickly. Not only do they make it very clear that the gesture was unwelcome, but you know that they're thinking, why would you do that? Why would you do such an uninvited thing? Hey, life goes on, right? I mean, I even, after a long time, I made some peace with those Ricky Lee Jones spoken word interludes. In particular, the one about how the heart is always one summer night, and you stretch it from face to face like chewing gum. And her bit about how holding hands was a gift of our landscapes. And I felt that, temporarily. I wouldn't give up a moment. Thanks very much for your time, and good night.